So the Wall Street Journal have published the contents of Jeffrey Epstein's calendar in an exclusive article on Sunday. We don't have all of the names of all of the people that Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and their associates trafficked children to, but we have some, and it's a start, a damn sight better than the absolutely nobody that Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of before, and that Jeffrey Epstein definitely killed himself over.
Yes.
Yes. Speaking of people who have evaded accountability for child molestation, unfortunately, it's not exclusive to the US and certain islands in the Caribbean. If you'd like to pay £5 a month to get excellent journalism from the rest of my colleagues, you can listen to Carl and Callum going through the comprehensive Grooming Gang timeline. There will be a part 2 of this, and our coverage, and I will keep people's names out of it, but there is a figurehead in mainstream media who has done lots of research on this topic too, and they passed along their commendations. So this really is a great resource to rebut the mainstream narratives that, for example, as some of the hack academics and rags like The Guardian have come out with, there are more white sex offenders. That's just not the issue, is it? And please try and understand per capita and religious discrimination, but that would undermine your push for diversity. Yeah. Speaking of disingenuous leftist elites, let's go on to the Wall Street Journal coverage, where we'll be mainly reading from today. So the documents don't reveal the purpose of most of the meetings in Epstein's calendar, though we can probably guess that it's at least currying favour, because we can't really allege much more for legal reasons, can we, Dan?
Oh, this is me being told to behave myself in this segment, I think.
Yes, we are big supporters of the Clintons and have absolutely no knowledge that would lead to their arrest. Please don't shoot
And we
me.
would probably suicide ourselves if we did.
Yes, with a shotgun that's been thrown multiple metres away, that has been shot while we're hanging ourselves.
Gaping bullet hole in the back of our head.
Exactly, yeah. The Wall Street Journal couldn't verify whether every one of the scheduled meetings took place, though some of the people on this calendar decided to verify it for us, so that's quite convenient. Most of these people told the Journal they visited Epstein for reasons related to his wealth and connections. Nothing to do with the noncing, then. Several said they thought he had served his time and had rehabilitated himself. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't hang around with a sex offender even if they'd said sorry. I don't really happen to know any, funnily enough.
Yes.
It's quite difficult. It's not like it was, I don't know, petty theft of a Freddo from a corner shop when he was 15. He's running the world's largest international child trafficking ring.
Yes.
Slight problem with the company you keep, but whatever. Let's go on to the names, okay? I assume they're not very high-profile people. William Burns, director of the CIA, since 2021.
So would William Burns, would he be the sort of person who could say to an underling, I'm going to have a meeting with this person, could you do a quick background check on them and just see if they got anything iffy in there?
Well, the CIA could also erase security footage or have inconvenient political opponents killed.
No, they would never do such a thing, I'm sure.
Oh, I'll inform the Kennedy family, I suppose. Mr. Burns met with Epstein about a decade ago as he was preparing to leave the government service, said CIA spokeswoman Tammy Kupperman-Thorpe. And then he promptly was appointed the head of the CIA by Biden in 2021. When he had 3 meetings with Epstein in 2014, he was Deputy Secretary of State. So under Hillary Clinton, documents show. They first met in Washington, and then Mr. Burns visited Epstein's townhouse in Manhattan. Thorpe continues, the director did not know anything about him, other than that he was introduced as an expert in the financial services sector and offered general advice on the transition to the private sector. They had no relationship. Now bear in mind, it's very interesting that the CIA has a heavy recruiting ground in Miami. The CIA were aware of Epstein's activities, and they actually intervened in the prosecution in Miami, I believe in 2014. And the Miami Herald, a local outlet, was the one that reported it. So it all centered around this particular area that Epstein was operating out of.
So, hang on. Am I to understand that we are expected to believe that he met with Epstein because he could give him career advice?
Yes.
Right, 3 times?
Yes.
Okay, in person?
In different locations.
Right.
In Epstein's own apartment. But he didn't know who he was.
Okay.
Right.
Something smells about that.
Yeah, just a humble university professor with millions and millions of dollars. Mr. Burns, 67, was a career diplomat and former ambassador to Russia, and he had meetings with Epstein in 2014. A lunch was planned that August in the office of a law of Steptoe and Johnson in Washington. Epstein scheduled 2 evening appointments that September with Mr. Burns at his townhouse. After one of the scheduled meetings, so we know these did at least happen, Epstein planned for his driver to take Mr. Burns to the airport. Less said about that, the better. Mr. Burns recalls being introduced in Washington by a mutual friend and meeting Epstein once briefly in New York, says Miss Thorpe. The director does not recall any further contact, including receiving a ride to the airport. The following month, October 2014, Mr. Burns stepped down from his role at the State Department to serve as president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, a think tank. International Peace. Friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He ran the Carnegie Endowment until he was nominated in early 2021 by President Biden to serve as CIA director, with absolutely no compromising materials on him, I am sure. Next person. Leon Botstein, the president of Bard College, invited Epstein, who brought a group of young female guests to the campus. Noam Chomsky, a professor, author and political activist, notorious leftist and darling of the anti-war left, was scheduled to fly with Epstein to have dinner at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in 2015. We'll get on to Noam Chomsky shortly. Mr. Botstein said he was trying to get Epstein to donate to his school. Mr. Chomsky said he and Epstein had discussed political and academic topics. I wonder if, given Epstein's line of work, Chomsky's concept of manufactured consent ever came up. I assume not. Mr. Botstein said also the longtime music director for the American Symphony Orchestra had invited Epstein to an opera at Bard in 2013, then a concert at the college in 2016, and Epstein had planned each time to bring some of his young female assistants and arrive by helicopter. So Botstein was saying, I was just trying to get some money from investors to my university, pay no attention to the fact that he basically possibly brought his sex slaves with him.
So these young female assistants, are they also supposed to be experts in career advice?
Or music, perhaps. Possible students of this prestigious.
Because I'm thinking as you're going through this list, the director of the CIA, did he not have an office? I mean, is the director of the CIA not a sufficiently important person that somebody who gives career advice would go to him and meet him in his office? I'm just wondering why it was the other way. And with all of this, it's like...
Wouldn't it have looked really bad to possibly have a convicted sex offender and someone on the CIA's register visiting his office?
Would it look less bad to go to his home?
Well, it could if the only place it turned up in documentation was the guy's private calendar, so it wasn't on any security footage like there would be in a government building.
Ah, right. Oh, that's
Though, to be fair, we do know from federal prisons in New York that sometimes the security footage does fail.
Multiple cameras, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
When substitute guards are working that one night only.
Yes, when they're asleep. And he hangs himself with very thin bed sheets from about 2 feet off the ground.
Stranger things have happened.
I'm sure they have, Mr. Clinton. Despite all these meetings, Mr. Botstein said Epstein never made a donation.
Oh, right, so it wasn't even a successful meeting then?
No. No, he just met with him multiple times with young female attendants for absolutely no financial return. It was a blessing in disguise, he said, that we never got any more money. Right. Moving swiftly on.
Maybe those young girls weren't such experts in fundraising after all.
No. They played a damn good flute, though, according to Mr. Botstein, I'm sure. Catherine Romola, a White House counsel under President Barack Obama. She had dozens of meetings with Epstein in the years after her White House service and before she became a top lawyer at Goldman Sachs, that generated Rishi Sunak, in 2020. He also planned for her to join a 2015 trip to Paris and a 2017 visit to Epstein's private island in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's just another private island. Interesting fact as well, totally unrelated to the Clintons. From 2000 to 2001, she was associate counsel to President Bill Clinton. Bugger. That must look really bad on old Bill. I'm sure he's got a squeaky clean record otherwise. It's not like Jeffrey had a painting of him in the house on the island in the Monica Lewinsky dress.
Oh, yes, he did, didn't he? Because you've got to wonder, if he... I mean, it's almost... If they weren't meeting for sex in this island, it's almost worse, because what else is... Because it's obviously not career advice, is it?
Well, we can only assume, because...
So what is he?
Is
he some sort of spook or something, or is he just harvesting...
Well, I would want to know where he got his money.
Well, that'd be nice, yeah.
We might find out about his political connections shortly. And I would like to say I cannot believe the Wall Street Journal released an article this anti-Semitic. It's really... It's not on, guys. It's not on at all.
If I want to find the full list of names, can I get that?
This is all we have from the article.
Oh, okay.
Because, of course, all the rest of the people that he trafficked children to, allegedly, was nobody.
Yes.
Even though there was a black book of the flight logs released, but people like Bill Gates and Bill Clinton have never properly been questioned on stand about that.
Yes.
Even though they went about 13 times with no security decal.
I'm sure that's quite common to ditch your security detail if you're an ex-president and you're going to a tropical island
Yeah, absolutely.
with a
I'm
registered sex offender.
just like Matt Groening. I too fly on private jets from registered sex offenders.
Hmm.
That's going to get clipped, isn't it? Bloody hell. We can also suspect she's in contact with the Biden administration, given the correspondence between Goldman Sachs and the World Economic Forum, of course, and the US Treasury Department. So she's still quite high up in government.
Yes.
Yeah, and her relations. From the article, Miss Romola had a professional relationship with Epstein in connection with her role at law firm Latham & Watkins LLP and didn't travel with him, a Goldman Sachs spokesperson said. Right. So the calendar is all just made up. That's what they're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Whatever. Epstein introduced her to potential legal clients, such as Microsoft Core co-founder Bill Gates. She was representing the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
It's not possible that she met up with him just to say, "Have you got a videotape of this person because we're thinking of putting them in a senior position, and we want to make sure we got dirt on them so that we can control them." Couldn't be that, could it?
I couldn't possibly allege that.
Right.
Though she does say, "I regret ever knowing Jeffrey Epstein." That's a direct quote from Romola.
I regret getting caught.
I bet you do, love. Spokesperson for Latham & Watkins said Epstein wasn't a client of the firm. Just met a lot with one of their executives, all right?
Yeah.
The documents show that Epstein appeared to know some of the guests quite well. He asked for avocado sushi rolls to be on hand when meeting with Miss Romola, according to the documents. He visited apartments she was considering buying. In October 2014, Epstein knew her travel plans and told an assistant to look into her flight, see if there's a first-class seat, he wrote, so I can upgrade her. Now, bear in mind, if this woman's name still doesn't ring any bells, if it goes to this Atlantic article, she was nearly Attorney General for the Obama administration. So when Eric Holder resigned, because he was too close to Barack Obama and a bunch of scandals, this is from the Atlantic article, it became clear that the nomination of a close advisor to the president in this partisan, polarized climate would prolong and distort the confirmation process into an opportunity for partisan attacks rather than an examination of the needs of the Department of Justice, a person familiar with Romola's decision said Friday. So she basically backed out of the high-profile role because she was too worried about media scrutiny. I wonder why. Couldn't allege anything whatsoever. Anyway, back to the article. Let's move on. Epstein called Miss Romola within weeks of her leaving the Obama White House. Epstein planned a launch in August 2014 at his townhouse, followed by a series of meetings to introduce her to a wider circle of his acquaintances. It really was just career advice.
Oh, well, there we go.
Nothing to do with the fact that she just left the Obama administration as almost the Attorney General. Someone very high up in legal defense. Miss Romola met Epstein after he called to ask if she would be interested in representing Bill Gates for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So Epstein made the connection with Bill Gates for her.
Oh, that's nice.
So he got her a job, at least. A spokeswoman for Mr. Gates said Epstein never worked for Mr. Gates, misrepresented their relationship, and that Mr. Gates regretted ever meeting him. Do you remember when Bill Gates, when asked about this, he said, well, he's dead now anyway?
Yeah. That was a very curious answer, that one.
Nothing says transparency like that, old man boobs, does it? Anyway, Epstein and his staff discussed whether Miss Romola, now 52, would be uncomfortable with the presence of young women who worked as assistants and staffers at the townhouse, the documents show. Women emailed Epstein on 2 occasions to ask if they should avoid the home while Miss Romola was there. So, suspicious aged women walking around Jeffrey Epstein's house, and they said, should we hide this if Miss Romola's going to visit?
Well, presumably they're all in business attire because, I mean, they're all experts in career advice and
Yes,
tax planning and whatever else.
Average LinkedIn employee.
Yes.
Epstein told one of the women he didn't want her around and another that it was a problem. Miss Romola didn't see anything that would lead her to be concerned at the townhouse and didn't express any concern, the Goldman Sachs spokesperson said, with total honesty. Several people who visited Epstein during this time said they noticed young women at his townhouse. One of the visitors, Helen Fisher, an anthropologist who studies romantic love and attachment, had lunch with Jeffrey Epstein in January 2016 to discuss her work. Dr. Fisher said that after lunch, Epstein invited her to speak with his staff, and then in filed, I would say, 6 young women, all of them good-looking, all of them young. Dr. Fisher said Epstein never funded her work, they weren't friends, and they didn't stay in touch. I didn't have anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein, she says, but I remembered it because of his spectacular house and because of the 6 young women. I'm sure.
I'd imagine a specialty in romantic love and attachment would be a bit redundant in that environment.
Yes. I don't imagine Jeffrey Epstein was that tender of a lover, considering he was a evil paedophile.
Yes.
Anyway, over the next few years, Miss Romola, then a partner specialising in white-collar defence at Latham & Watkins, had more than 36 appointments with Epstein, including for lunch and dinners. In the normal course, Epstein also invited her to meetings and social gatherings, invited her to other business contacts, and made referrals, the Goldman Sachs spokesperson says. It was the kind of contracts and engagements she had with other contacts and clients. What a shame that none of those other contacts and clients trafficked children, allegedly, of course. For the other clients. We know Epstein did, so it doesn't look that good. In 2015, she was scheduled to fly with Epstein to Paris, and in 2017, he planned to stop in St. Lucia to take her to his island home in the US Virgin Islands for the day. Miss Romola never visited the island and never accepted an invitation to fly with Jeffrey Epstein anywhere, the Goldman Sachs spokesperson did. Now, if it didn't look like enough like a conspiracy, being involved with large banks, Alex Jones is going to be tearing his hair out. Epstein also connected Miss Romola with Adrian D. Rothschild. Yes, it's who you think. Who is now the chief executive of the Swiss private bank Edmond de Rothschild Group. The bank hired Miss Romola's law firm, Latham & Watkins, after the introduction to help with US regulatory matters, according to the bank and Goldman Sachs spokesperson. So they're just admitting that. Miss Rothschild, who married into the famous banking family, had more than a dozen meetings with Epstein herself. He sought her help with staffing.
Yes.
That's a bit weird, isn't it?
Oh, and especially after the last segment we've just done. I mean, I'm sure it's not the case that the banking sector would be in any way interested in being able to control powerful people.
Yeah. Considering that they liaise specifically to get around US regulations.
Yes.
And he was speaking to the director of the now director of the CIA at the time, who was the deputy secretary of state.
Oh, but that was for career advice.
Oh,
so that's
yeah,
right. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, maybe he was hiring him as one of the new staffers. Maybe he's walking around in a little mailed outfit. I'm sure there's photos of that somewhere. I am actually probably sure there is. In September 2013, Epstein asked Miss Rothschild for an email for finding a new assistant. Female, multilingual, and organised. I'll ask around, Rothschild emailed back. She then bought $1 million worth of auction items on Epstein's behalf in 2014 and 2015. Miss Rothschild was named chairwoman of the bank in 2015. That October, Epstein and her negotiated a $25 million contract for Epstein's Southern Trust Corporation to provide risk analysis and the application and use of certain algorithms for the bank. In 2019, after Epstein was arrested, the bank said Miss Rothschild had never met with Epstein and had no business links with him. The bank then acknowledged to the Journal that its earlier statement wasn't quite accurate. It said Miss Rothschild met with Epstein as part of her normal duties at the bank between 2013 and 2019, and that Epstein introduced the bank to US financial leaders, recommended law firms, and provided tax and risk consulting. I can't imagine why the bank would want to distance themselves from Jeffrey Epstein. Not possible.
So look, from what we know so far, the type of people that Epstein was meeting with on a regular basis were Rothschilds, senior people in the Obama and Clinton administration, and directors of CIA. So that's the general sort of milieu
and Bill Gates.
Yes, of characters that he used to hang out with.
Yeah.
And we have to try and work out from this why is the case that nobody that he solicited children to has been prosecuted.
Or that nobody blew the whistle on it at any point.
Yes.
Because none of them knew. None of them knew about this, bear in mind. Absolutely no one had any idea, except for those that said they hung out with him because they thought he served his time.
Well, there's no reason why, just to pick a name at random, the director of the CIA should be able to find out about that sort of stuff about somebody that he spends time with.
What about Henry Kissinger? Do you think he would probably know?
Well, he's very old.
Oh, but what about his deputies at the Bilderberg Group?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
One of Epstein's scheduled meetings with Miss Rothschild in January 2014 included another of his regular guests, Joshua Cooper Ramo, the then co-chief executive of the Henry Kissinger corporate consulting firm. Alex Jones right yet again. Epstein scheduled more than a dozen meetings in 2013 to 17 with Mr. Ramo, who at the time served on the boards of Starbucks Corp and FedEx, the documents show. Epstein had special snacks on hand because he believed Mr. Ramo was a vegetarian. Many of Mr. Ramo's appointments with Epstein were in the evenings, typically after 5 p.m. at the townhouse. He was also invited to breakfast at the townhouse in September 2013 with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. I don't think we can say anything that wouldn't get us pulled off YouTube here. But if we wanted to speculate about the sources of Epstein's wealth, corrupt governments might be one.
It's definitely a possibility, isn't it?
Yes. And his connection with intelligence agencies.
Because the money had to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And he's got.
I'm not going Kanye West here, by the way.
He's got connections to all sorts of powerful people, and he seems to have some sort of mechanism to sort of maybe get leverage over them.
Moving on. Mr. Ramo, who still sits on the board of FedEx and recently stepped down from Starbucks, didn't respond to the Wall Street Journal's request for comment. A spokesperson for Mr. Kissinger said he wasn't aware that Mr. Ramo was meeting with Mr. Epstein. I'm sure you weren't. Barack also met with Epstein in 2015 with Mr. Chomsky, now 94. Mr. Chomsky said Epstein had arranged the meeting with Mr. Barack to discuss Israel's policies with regard to Palestinian issues in the international arena. So, let me get this straight. Jeffrey Epstein, who was, a maths professor, is meeting with Noam Chomsky and the former Prime Minister of Israel to discuss the Israeli-Palestine conflict, to tell the government what to do. Why would they possibly go to him for that? Very strange, isn't it?
Well, he also does career advice.
Okay.
So he's
Palestinian job program.
Yes, so he's got
Gotcha.
a lot of things in his sort of skill set, really, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
When asked about his relationship with Mr. Epstein, Mr. Chomsky replied in an email, first response is that it's none of your business, or anyone's. Maybe law enforcement, if they did their job. Second is that I knew him and we met occasionally. Oh, thanks for all the detail there, Noam. Definitely going on credibility there. I mean, at least we know now that either Noam Chomsky is so incompetent a judge of character that nothing that he's ever said in his entire leftist tenure can be taken seriously, or that he's just a liar. But again, we can't allege anything, of course.
I actually quite like manufacturing consent. He does make some good points in there.
Yeah, it's a great idea,
Yeah.
but he doesn't recognise the fact that the leftist media do that, especially when he's pushing for vaccine mandates.
Oh yeah, he's completely
Yeah.
He's got one itis on myopia on this stuff.
Again, dumb,
Yeah.
or a liar. Allegedly. Absolutely couldn't say otherwise. In March 2015, Epstein scheduled a gathering with Mr. Chomsky and Harvard University professor Martin Nowak and other academics, according to the documents. Mr. Chomsky said they had several meetings at Mr. Nowak's research institute to discuss neuroscience. 2 months later, Epstein planned to fly with Mr. Chomsky and his wife to have dinner with them and movie director Woody Allen. No comments about paedophilia there. And his wife, Suni Previn. If there was a flight, which I doubt, it would have been from Boston to New York, 30 minutes, said Mr. Chomsky. I'm sure. I'm unaware of the principle that requires I inform you about an evening I spent with a great artist. And the world's leading child sex trafficker.
Yeah.
That's kind of the important part. No. Couldn't allege you're covering up for anything at all. None of the names appear in Epstein's now public black book. So this is a whole new set of client names. So we still have an incomplete picture. And of course, the documents show that Epstein arranged multiple meetings with each of them after he had served jail time in 2008 for the sex crime involving a teenage girl, which required him to register as a sex offender. The documents, which include thousands of pages of emails and schedules from 2013 to 2017, haven't been previously reported. And I'm sure this isn't the end of a treasure trove of incriminating details, but I'm sure we're not going to get the full picture because it would probably implicate far too many people than is convenient for the regime. But all of these people on the list, I am totally sure on the up and up. I'm sure have absolutely nothing of them doing anything untoward towards Jeffrey Epstein's staff on camera, and I can't wait for them to be able to clear their names so we know the upstanding character of our elites is still intact. We hope you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. If you did, you can go to our website where you can get the podcast in full, uncensored, and for free, as well as paying as little as £5 a month to get access to all of our extra premium content. For example, this video presentation I did on how real communism has already been tried, looking at the texts and history of Marxism. And if you'd like to see all the rest of the content that we're putting out, you can follow us at lotuseaters_com on Twitter and on Getter. Until next time, goodbye.